Hello, my name is Lo, and I am currently interested in the idea of canceling. In part one, I defined canceling as holding influencers accountable for the harm they inflict on their audiences, which I believe to be positive and necessary. I do, however, make a distinction between canceling and deleting, which I define as the negative pursuit of punishments as opposed to justice. In part two, I looked at several YouTubers who have been canceled and either dismissed the criticism, which created an unwelcoming community, or apologized and improved, which helps their audiences heal and improve as well. So, I've canceled people, I've been canceled, I've seen others get canceled, I've seen cancellations with positive impacts, I've seen cancellations with negative impacts, I've seen cancellations with everything in between. And at the end of the day, even though some influencers have improved after being canceled, that word seems to be used more frequently to dismiss critics than to actually hold influencers accountable. So what can we do? How do we speak truth to power when our method of doing so is so often flipped and used against us? Well, just to get this out of the way, I don't think this is a problem that can be solved by replacing cancel with a different word. I mean, we were already having similar conversations about call-outs a few years ago and trashing way back in the 70s. And while drawing a line between canceling and deleting may help us understand and talk about our responses to harm, I don't think defining or redefining these words will actually help us keep each other accountable. Regardless of the words we use, these same patterns are going to continue until we figure out a more effective way of healing and bettering ourselves after harm is done. I also don't think we can solve our accountability problems by just filling these powerful positions with better people like the people I talked about in part two who publicly owned up to their mistakes and improved. I hate to say it, but just because these three held themselves accountable this time, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would always do that every time in any context. I mean, we know that power tends to corrupt even the most well-intentioned of people, so it would be pretty irresponsible to just try and find influencers who we hope will be the exception to that rule. I personally think that any real and sustainable solution would require us to entirely reimagine the way we distribute power in the first place. I would love to see a world where no one person's voice is so loud that they can hurt thousands of people with a single mindless statement. But while it would be great to click my heels 3 times and transport to a post-scarcity utopia, wishful thinking isn't gonna get us there. So right now, what can we do to get us closer to that solution? Unfortunately, I think one of the best things we can do is just work on ourselves. And I say unfortunately because working on ourselves isn't nearly as fun and exciting as smash things we don't like. And don't get me wrong, there's definitely a part of me that would love nothing more than to guillotine Bezos. A large part of me. But there was an entire book and musical and movie about how chopping off heads without also collectively addressing our baggage will only lead to more misery.
Now when we fought for good.
As Mexi says,
but if we're not collectively doing the work we need to do to ensure that we are whole, secure people who are capable of being selfless and capable of living in harmony and compassion with others around us, then our collective ego and our collective state of being will be such that we still get a lot of people who are attached to competition and power. Generally not being right with ourselves is something that I think contributes to us harming others.
So we gotta do some difficult emotional work. First, I think we need to get a little more comfortable with vulnerability. As much as conservative media likes to portray anyone left of them as a bunch of babies with victim complexes, I think a lot of us are actually afraid of being victims. And let me know if I'm just projecting here, but I think a lot of us want to see ourselves as strong, cool, unaffected by the haters. So we don't want to align ourselves with people who admit to being hurt. We don't want to empathize with people who suffer from abuse or get weighed down by microaggressions or get offended by slurs because we don't want to feel powerless ourselves. But the YouTuber Philosophy Tube says that being vulnerable can actually help our communities become stronger.
Human beings are always going to be vulnerable. We're always going to get old. We're always going to get sick. We're always eventually going to die. We're going to grieve. We're going to hurt the people we love without really meaning to. We're going to get anxious and we're going to get afraid. And so a political family that brings people together by saying, hey, it's okay. We're all vulnerable and you don't need to be ashamed of it, is always, always, always going to have some kind of appeal. Vulnerability is the beginning of true solidarity.
So the next time someone says that your favorite influencer did something hurtful, take a second to think about the vulnerabilities you share with the victim before you dismiss and further harm the person who is brave enough to speak up. Secondly, we need to stop thinking of people as good or bad and instead move towards a model of restorative justice. We need to recognize that everyone, including our favorite influencers and ourselves, everyone is good and bad, has done harm and received harm, and is always capable of change. So when someone does something hurtful, we as the cancelers still have to remember that this is a human. I'm not saying we have to pretend like we're not hurt or take on the responsibility of fixing them, just that we probably shouldn't engage in abusive behaviors like sending them death threats or cutting them off from their support systems.
Incarcerating people or isolating them does not undo harm. It doesn't undo the physical or discursive violence or abuse. And it doesn't do any work toward creating a world where that harm does not happen again. I say that while acknowledging that the needs of the people who've been harmed should always be centered. And we can do that while developing reconciliation mechanisms for people who want to do better, who admit fault. There's no need to permanently discard them.
In the words of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a Twitter thread deleting her with receipts." There's a common saying that hurt people hurt people. So when we do experience harm, we should prioritize taking care of ourselves and healing that wound so that we don't end up harming others in response. Which brings me to my next point, that on the flip side, we as the canceled need to constantly be doing the internal work to improve.
A person who has caused harm in, a particular situation volunteers to repair the harm, volunteers to rebuild trust with the person who's been harmed, as well as with the community that has been harmed.
The active engagement from both and all parties and community to really understand some of the root causes behind the infraction, what actually occurred. So we use terms like healing and make sure that folks are accountable, but in very, lay's terms, if something was stolen, well, what was the impetus behind needing that thing? Is it because there is a void or a gap in the life of that particular person or student, et cetera? So the healing also encompasses what is that need that was unmet that led to whatever this situation was that occurred.
We should all try to look at cancellation as an arrow pointing at our unmet needs or unhealed wounds so we can solve the issue at its root and prevent any further hurt. There's a perfect example of this in part 2, how Shan Booty used her offensive comment about men as a jumping off point to examine and improve her relationship with herself and her husband. It takes a lot of humility and maturity, but it makes ourselves and our communities so much stronger in the end. All that being said, there are some people who will resist accountability.
Some people just do be racist. Some people just do be problematic. And I understand the impulse to give people leeway. I totally get it. I understand why that happens. I think that it's natural to want to believe that someone just doesn't know any better. But there are some people who really just do be racist. And it's really not worth your energy or time to sit around to figure out which one it is, if they are ignorant or they just do be racist.
And in that case, we just have to accept that we each are limited in our power. I can't force Unnatural Vegan to reflect on the hurt she caused and make amends for it. I wouldn't be able to do that even if I were rich and powerful. All I can do is stop supporting her, let others know about her mistakes, and focus on healing myself and meeting my needs, so that I don't end up harming people as well. Hopefully other audience members will understand the importance of holding her accountable, and hopefully our collective voice will be loud enough to convince her to take our message seriously. But I've already said all I have to say to her, and many others have done the same, so I mean it this time. I'm not going to talk about her anymore on this channel.
If you see a creator doing something that makes you upset, I don't think that you're wrong for saying, I don't care for that person anymore and moving forward. I wish more people would just do that.
And lastly, I think we all need to reevaluate our relationships with influencers. In part one, I brought up how parasocial relationships make audiences feel like influencers are their friends. YouTubers are particularly good at encouraging parasocial relationships.
First of all, YouTubers, unlike celebrities, in their videos, they are depicting their actual selves, their own personalities. They're not obviously acting as a different character. YouTubers are giving you direct eye contact, addressing you directly and talking to you, giving you a unique name or in-group identity, giving you different calls to action as the friend would and asking you to do stuff, frequently publishing new content, filming in a relatable location or background like a bedroom, which makes it feel like you're kind of at their house almost. And most importantly, sharing intimate and personal information with you.
And this is intentional because an emotionally invested audience is a profitable audience. At the same time, though, viewers are active and willing participants in this. When people are busy, lonely, depressed, socially anxious, it's nice to be able to turn on a YouTube video to get the feeling of hanging out with a friend. A pausable, on-demand friend. In some ways, these convenient parasocial relationships can be preferable to the messy realities of life, to the point that some viewers see YouTubers as their best friends, or even their only friends.
You end up truly spending less time with people because the time you would have been spending with people is taken up watching YouTube. And so YouTubers start replacing your real life friends. Yeah. And why this is actually even more crazy is that there's a really common knowledge and saying that you are the 6 people that you spend the most time with. And if you're starting to spend much more of your time with YouTubers who are replacing your friends, these YouTubers are impacting you and your identity and how you act and what you say.
So when a YouTuber does something hurtful, it stings a lot more. Plus, viewers can't just sit down with a YouTuber and talk it out like they could do with a real friend who did the same thing. So when we develop a strong parasocial relationship, we're essentially handing a stranger the power to determine our emotions. When we look at influencers, it's easy to forget that they're acting. Even if they don't mean to, they only ever present a curated version of themselves, so their viewers only ever interact with characters based off the actors. So forget seeing them as friends, we don't even really see them as human. They're just a smoothed out version of a person that we love and trust specifically because we don't want to deal with the complexities of real relationships. And we don't want to admit that we've invested so much energy and money and faith into a flawed person, so we'd rather just continue ignoring their negative traits. If we accept that our faves are problematic, we'd have to accept that we are problematic. So when we see someone cancel the influencer, our fake best friend, we immediately get defensive on their behalf and dismiss the canceller. And we end up dehumanizing both the victim and the perpetrator. So how do we fight against this? Is it possible to have parasocial relationships that don't lead to these negative outcomes? Honestly, I don't know. I don't know if we can keep the benefits of influencer culture without accepting the harmful power structures along with it. Logically, I want to say that we should just stop emotionally investing in these influencers. Remove the pedestal that we place them on. But emotionally, I like YouTube. I like watching these creators. I like feeling like I know them. And if I'm being completely honest, I like the idea that influencers exist because I want to be one. And I am horrifically aware of the irony that I'm sitting here as a very small creator in a video that references many of my favorite larger creators, talking about how I know that my own parasocial relationships are probably unhealthy, but I don't want to divest from them, and I actually kind of want people to form a parasocial relationship with me, and that's definitely something I'm going to continue reflecting on. But bringing all of this back to the main idea, as long as we willingly hand power over to other people, as long as we hold onto our fake perceptions of our fake friends, as long as we value our own proximity to power, we won't be able to hold influencers accountable for their actions. I named this series Kill Your Idols after a Sonic Youth song from 1983. If you don't know, Sonic Youth was an innovative alt-rock band fronted by the couple Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon. In just 35 words, the song tells a story about the band forming new priorities after receiving a negative review from a respected rock critic. They questioned why they ever sought Christgau's approval in the first place, and they set a new goal: to create the music they want to create, free from the expectations and restrictions made by music authorities. Unsurprisingly, Christgau responded defensively, saying, "Idolization is for rock stars. Critics just want a little respect." I don't want to spend too much time analyzing the 80s alt-rock scene, but suffice it to say that disrespecting music critics and killing idols was a popular and foundational part of the movement. But Christgau was partially right. Once Sonic Youth was done killing the idols of the music industry, these rock stars themselves became the idols of the counterculture. And sure enough, Thurston Moore eventually became the power-abusing influencer he once would have condemned. In an essay on Flavor Wired called Thurston Moore, Twilight of the Idol, Tom Hawking says, "For a certain generation, the Kim and Thurston romance was a sort of rock and roll fairy tale, an aspirational love story intertwined with the history of one of the best bands ever to grace a stage together. And yet, at the same time, he was relatable. He proved that you don't have to be a heartbreaking, groupie, shaggin' alpha male to be cool. They were people like us, and they were awesome. But still, it's not because Thurston Moore turned out to be a human that this whole sorry business is disappointing. It's because it looks suspiciously like he turned out to be a dick." And that can sound pretty bleak. If killing our idols doesn't actually fix anything, then what's the point of even trying to hold powerful people accountable? But I'd like to think it's kind of encouraging, because Thurston Moore could have refused to become an idol, the same way George Washington refused to become a king, and Thought Slime refused to become an enabler, and many former cops refused to become bastards. With whatever power you have, you can decide to not be a dick and not give any more power to other dicks. Social hierarchies and cycles of harm aren't an unavoidable fact of nature. People organized ourselves into these systems so we can organize ourselves into a different one. We can decide to limit influencers' influence and stop perpetuating these power structures. We can decide to move towards restorative justice and collectively heal in our communities. We can decide to show our vulnerabilities and empathize with each other's experiences. It'll be difficult, but we can build a better system where everyone is entitled to the full complexity of being a human, and everyone is responsible for improving. We just have to buckle down and do it. Thank you for watching this video. This is the last scripted segment of my Kill Your Idols series on canceling, and I hope it got you thinking more about this topic. In the spirit of accountability, I hope you'll leave a comment letting me know what you think, or correcting me on any misinformation, or challenging any of my ideas, and I'll swallow my pride as much as possible when I read them. I might even end up making a follow-up video if I see any particularly interesting points made, or if I want to clarify or correct anything, but either way, I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can. Okay, bye!